Hey everybody, how are you all doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to discuss the possibility of a Metroid and a Legend of Zelda collection releasing in 2021. So this concept has been a pretty popular theory and topic of conversation amongst the community for the past several months, most notably, as we all know, because in September, Nintendo dropped the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection on the Nintendo Switch, which was a very interesting and, in my opinion, pretty cool, but also very controversial release of three classic 3D Mario games, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy, on the Nintendo Switch in a collection all in HD. But because of other factors about how Nintendo went about porting this and the limited release time for this game, it became pretty divisive. Now, this collection was something that was rumored throughout most of 2021, right? It was around February or March earlier in the year when the conversation got out there that Nintendo may be looking at releasing some sort of HD collection of 3D Mario games. And in August, Nintendo actually held a Mario 35th Anniversary Nintendo Direct where they did confirm that yes, this game was going to be releasing. And like I said, even though a lot of people were upset about it for reasons that in a lot of ways are justified for sure, I myself really wasn't losing much sleep over it. I was just excited to have these games releasing. In my opinion, $60 for three amazing, fantastic classic Mario games in HD was totally worth it on the Switch. I didn't need it to be anything more than that. I did have an issue with the 6-month release frame for this thing. I think that that's a huge problem. But everything else, I don't mind. I thought it was great. And now, because of that release, it also had a lot of people talking about the idea of Nintendo doing something similar for The Legend of Zelda or for Metroid, because next year in 2021, it will be the 35th anniversary of those two franchises, just like this year, 2020, represented the 35th anniversary for the Super Mario franchise and the Super Mario name, which is what led to the 3D All-Stars collection even existing. So, it would stand to reason that if Nintendo was willing to do it for Mario this year, why wouldn't they do it for their other two massive old-school franchises, Zelda and Metroid? Now, a ton of people have discussed this over the past several months, and I, on the regular, get questions about it. People wanting me to talk about it or ask, what do I think? Do you think there's a chance we're going to see a Zelda collection or a Metroid collection next year? You're the Metroid guy, Rob, so you have to have thoughts and theories about a Metroid collection for the anniversary. What do you think? And I appreciate that I get those questions, and yes, I do have some thoughts, but I think one of the reasons I didn't really make a video discussion about it right away is because I needed to really think about it. I needed to have some time to kind of stew on the idea and really search my feelings, so to speak, and determine, do I really think this is something that Nintendo would do? Was the 3D All-Stars collection just a one-off? And Nintendo sometimes will ignore anniversaries of franchises, and so maybe that's what's going to happen next year, and they're not going to be paying attention to Zelda or Metroid at all. And so I thought about it, and now that I'm making this video, I can tell you that, honestly, I do kind of think that there's a good chance it's going to happen. Initially, after the launch of Mario 3D All-Stars, I was convincing myself that there probably wasn't going to be a situation where we see a Metroid collection or a Zelda collection or any sort of real celebration from Nintendo for these two franchises next year. I kind of was like playing the cynical route, and I was like, you know, I really do think 3D All-Stars was a one-off. It was a unique thing because Mario's their #1 brand. And so even though Zelda and Metroid are huge in their own respects, I mean, Zelda's actually massive in its own respect, I just wasn't sure that they were going to do that next year. But honestly, after thinking about it, I've come around to the idea, and the more I stew on the idea, the more sense it makes for Nintendo to release some sort of collection similar to 3D All-Stars for these franchises next year. I think if we start off first focusing on Zelda, that's the one that initially I was actually less sure about. I was like, well, maybe Metroid makes more sense for reasons that I'll get into. Zelda, yes, it makes sense, but I just think Nintendo's gonna maybe wait a little bit before they do something like this for Zelda. But I started to realize there's no reason why they wouldn't. Zelda is almost as big as Mario. It's been as important to Nintendo as anything else since they launched the NES, you know? Both Zelda and Metroid first released their first games on the NES and Famicom back in 1986. And The Legend of Zelda was such a seminal moment for gaming and for the launch of that console you know, well, near the launch of that console, and the commercials promising a never-ending adventure. I mean, I've talked about this stuff before. And so, you know what? When I thought about the games that could possibly be on this collection, I think that's where I started to come around on the idea. Because we think, what are the games that Nintendo would even include? If they're going to do a Zelda or a Metroid collection, what games are they going to be? For Zelda, I started to realize, you know, there's already 4 games, 4 3D Zelda games, that have gotten the remake, remaster, or updated visual treatment from Nintendo. 2 of them were already done in HD, so this leads me to believe, you know, a lot of the work is kind of already done for Nintendo here. They were willing to put forth, you know, what little effort it took to make the 3 Mario games HD, but with the Zelda games, they've got 2 that were updated visually, and then another 2 that were updated and remastered into HD. So much of the journey is already done for Nintendo before they would even consider releasing these games. Now, obviously, I'm talking about, in HD, we've got the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, which released on the Wii U, and then we also have the Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, updated and remade in 3D for the Nintendo 3DS. And people forget, that wasn't just a situation where they took those games and allowed the 3D effect for the 3DS to work. They also updated the visuals, the graphics, the textures, the lighting, even some of the geometry on some of the character models. Those games, while they're standard definition, 480p or whatever the 3DS is, they do look really, really good. They put a ton of work into those games. And so suddenly I started to realize that this makes sense for The Legend of Zelda, because they could easily port Wind Waker and Twilight Princess already in HD, just put those games on the Nintendo Switch. We'll lose the gamepad support for the HD remasters, but they'll still be there, playable in HD, and it'll be great. And then, like I said, they went through the effort to take 3 classic old games and make them HD for the Mario games. Why aren't they going to be willing to do the same thing for the 2 3DS games? They could take Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask in 3D with all of their updated visuals and lighting and stuff, and just make that HD. And right there, you've got 4 potential games that could be on a collection. Maybe they wouldn't want to include the 3DS games, but I just feel like it would make so much sense to do so because they already exist. And this, of course, leaves one big X factor, one outlier here, and that, of course, is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, a game which I adore, a game which I feel deserves to be removed from the Nintendo Wii and doesn't need to be trapped on that console anymore because of its controller. And that is a game that I think would be a huge hit and make people very excited if there was a way to port it to the Nintendo Switch. And I've said numerous times, I personally believe it's possible, partly because the Joy-Cons allow for some motion control where they could emulate the Wii remote for Skyward Sword. And so we suddenly have 4 games already done, most of the work already done, and then a 5th game that I think could also happen. So what would they do between Ocarina, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker? That's a lot of Zelda games, man. Would they put all 5 games on a collection? Would they put the 4 that have already been remade on a collection? That's more than the 3 Mario games. Would Nintendo make that extra step and make 4 games? Would they make a multiple collection where one has Majora and Ocarina, the other has Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker? Or do they release them individually? I mean, at this point, it gets crazy trying to think about what they would do. But all I can think in my heart and soul is that these games, 4 of them already exist. And Nintendo did what they did for Mario. I think they would absolutely do the same thing for Zelda. Now, we come to my favorite here. We come to the big boy. We're coming to Metroid. What could Nintendo do for Metroid next year to celebrate the 35th anniversary? Of course, because of Mario 3D All-Stars, the main thing we're all focusing on for celebrating anniversaries is HD remaster collections, right? We're kind of just assuming that's the only way Nintendo would celebrate an anniversary of Zelda or Metroid. And to be fair, they might do something totally different to celebrate these franchises than what they did with Mario, so we have to remember that. Maybe they do celebrate, but they're just not releasing new collections of games. But this conversation is about the game collection, so we're going to stay focused on that. So what would they do for Metroid, man? Well, here's the reason why I came around on Metroid pretty darn quickly. And partly it's because I already expected something Metroid to release in 2021 anyway. But beyond that, it's the fact that the Metroid Prime trilogy already exists. And I know we've been talking about the Prime Trilogy forever, for what feels like eons. When is this coming to Switch? When is it going to get ported? When is it releasing in HD? When is it yada 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 yada? We've been talking about this for a while, and I get that. But if we actually pay attention to the semantics and what logically makes sense, here's the deal. Just like with Zelda, when it comes to Metroid, half of the work for Nintendo is already done. There already exists a collection of 3 classic standard definition GameCube and Wii Metroid games. And so Nintendo took 3 classic SD Mario games and made them HD. Why wouldn't they take 3 classic Metroid games that are in standard definition and make those HD? Especially when you've already got a menu and a collection and everything that the Prime Trilogy was. All they have to do is just make that thing HD and put it on the Nintendo Switch. They did it with Mario. I just firmly believe there's such a good chance they're already going to do that with the Prime Trilogy next year. And think about it. All they'd have to do is call it Metroid Prime Trilogy Anniversary HD. There's your name, Nintendo. I've given it to you. Metroid Prime Trilogy Anniversary HD. And Bob's your uncle. We have it on the Nintendo Switch. And, you know, some of the same questions come up as did with the Zelda thing at the end here. And I've said this stuff about the Prime Trilogy before. How would they do it? Would they release it physical? Would they make it a significant remaster and a remake? Would they really update stuff? Are they just going straight HD the way they did with Mario? If so, would they make it digital only? Or maybe they wouldn't even do it as a trilogy. They'd release it as individual games to be downloaded on the eShop or something. I mean, you start to realize that both with Zelda and with Metroid, if there's anything to the idea of Nintendo releasing remade and remastered games to celebrate the anniversary, there's a variety of ways they could do that. And I even had the same discussions about the Mario collection when it was still a rumor. I was like, how are they going to do the Mario games? Individually, as a collection, HD, standard definition, remaster, remake, new content, no new content? I mean, I had that conversation then, and I want to have it again now. Now, of course, it's tricky because the Mario 3D All-Stars kind of sets a little bit of an expectation. Like, if all they did was the bare minimum, make them HD and throw them on the console in a physical package, then maybe we can assume that's what they would do with Zelda and Mario. Here's 4 Zelda games, make them HD, throw them in a physical package. Here's the Metroid Prime Trilogy, 3 games, make them HD, throw them in a package physical. Maybe that's all they do. But again, I think we all want that stuff to happen. We would all buy these things for sure. And now with Metroid, I've obviously already been predicting some stuff to happen for Metroid in 2021, as you guys know, if you've been following me for any length of time, especially in 2020. We might get, you know, a Samus Returns HD port. We might get, believe it or not, an HD port of Other M. I know everyone hates it, but I think that there's a chance Nintendo would do something like that. I've also been expecting a brand new game, a 2D game, not Metroid Prime 4, but a new 2D Metroid, or a Metroid 5. Maybe a remake of Super Metroid, or Metroid Fusion. I mean, there's a lot of different things Metroid-wise I've already been kind of hoping for and expecting in 2021. And so we come back to the 35th anniversary thing, and it's like, well, would they do something else? Maybe one of those other things is meant to happen to celebrate the anniversary. But I still just come back to the trilogy. And I know a lot of people are sick of us talking about the trilogy because it's been going on for 2 years and we haven't heard anything about it. But I still honestly just believe it's going to happen. You know, there were plenty of discussions, you guys, about the fact that Nintendo was planning it, but they changed course. And so why wouldn't they bring that idea back? And suddenly they're in the convenient position of, well, we didn't really get to release it in 2019 like we expected, but now we have 2021. It's the 35th anniversary. Here's our Prime Trilogy. Make that puppy HD, throw it on the Switch, and we're going to make a killing off of it. At the end of the day, what all of this stuff means, that I'm just rambling out to you guys about these ideas, is that obviously, yes, I think that there's a good chance that Nintendo might be ready to drop some major bombs in the Zelda and Metroid world next year and say, hey, 35th anniversary, just like we did for Mario, we're going to celebrate Zelda and Metroid. Here's a bunch of classic games, hopefully touched up and remastered with better graphics, HD visuals, and with any luck, fingers crossed, maybe we get some extra content or some actual remade assets. I mean, imagine if they make an extra step with Zelda or Metroid and they do more than just make them HD and throw them on the console. What if they really touch up textures and models and lighting and really make things pop and feel more modern? I mean, it's a lot of work from Nintendo, but we've seen them do that with like the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, or even Zelda Link's Awakening, or hell, even Metroid Samus Returns. I mean, they've done a remake both in the Zelda and Metroid franchises, so maybe they would do that for the anniversaries. I don't know, man. This just gets me really excited. If you can't tell, I think this is a very exciting prospect. Maybe none of this happens. Like I said, maybe they're not going to celebrate the anniversaries, or maybe they're going to celebrate the anniversary in a different way. Maybe it won't even be with games. Maybe it's going to be like, oh, here's a temporary theme for the Nintendo Switch eShop. Or we're going to release a book or an art collection. Maybe they do stuff like that, you know, or some like a YouTube video talking about the franchise. You know, they might do something like that, and yes, that would be less exciting than a physical game, but we have to keep our mind open, you know. I mean, Nintendo's hard to predict, man. Like, I feel pretty good that they're probably going to do this stuff, but maybe they don't, man. So either way, these are just my thoughts and really just my theories and guesses about the fact that, yeah, I feel pretty good that Nintendo might release some cool stuff for Zelda and Metroid next year. And like, how badly do we want that, you guys? How exciting could it be to have new Metroid and new Zelda to play on our Nintendo Switches? We haven't had any Metroid to play on our Switches, not counting the online service stuff. So it would just be massive news if that happened. So these are my thoughts and opinions. I want to hear your own take and your own thoughts and opinions about everything we discussed today. Do you think Nintendo is going to do it, or do you think they're not going to do it? And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.